Thank you, Mr. Manmohan Khemka, the founder of CA Vichar Manch, Shri Manmohan Khemka, Shri Sushil ji, और यतेंद्र खेमका जी, मनप्रीत जी, एडवोकेट सुरेश जी, और मेरे सीए विचार मंच के सब साथियों, मैं आप सबका स्वागत करता हूं सीए विचार मंच की इस जूम कॉन्फ्रेंस, जो इसे कॉन्फ्रेंस नहीं कहना चाहिए, इसे वर्कशॉप कहना चाहिए, दिस इज जीएसटी वर्कशॉप, in which we are going to actually go into the minute and deep details of GST. We are all aware that CA Vichar Manch has done a tremendous job from the launch of GST in our country, for bringing it to chartered accountants and other professionals, all aspects in such a practical manner that we have been able to handle most of our assignments very effectively, efficiently and professionally. Friends like Shri Sushil Verma, Shri Suresh ji, Shri Yatindra Khemka ji, Shri Manmohan Khemka ji, Shri Vaibhav Jain ji, Shri Manpreet ji, और बाकी हमारे सब साथी हमें अच्छे से ज्ञान देते रहे हैं और हम लोग सब अच्छे से सीखते रहे हैं. I am a student of GST. I have been advisor to GST Council as appointed by Government of India. You are aware. We are also working very closely now with the government, as the COVID-19 has brought new challenges. At the same time, new opportunities are knocking our door. So I think we'll be talking sometime else about the new opportunities, how, what role all of us can play. Right now, we are here to learn GST, and we'll go deeper into the detail of GST. Without adding any further time, taking any further time, I request Shri Sushil Verma ji to please take up his session. Unless Mr. Manmohan Khemka, you want to add anything before this, then it is your choice, sir. From my side, the organizers can really take up from here.
Thanks, Vinod ji. I request Yatindra Khemka ji to say few words only, 20 seconds only. अनम्यूट कीजिए यतिंदर जी, पहले अनम्यूट कीजिए यतिंदर जी.
गुड आफ्टरनून एवरीबॉडी. आज बड़ा हर्ष का विषय है कि ऐसे लॉकडाउन के समय में हम इतने रेलिवेंट टॉपिक पे अपनी नॉलेज को रिफ्रेश करने के लिए आज यहाँ सब एक साथ जुड़े हैं. और क्योंकि एज ए प्रोफेशन हमारी इस देश के प्रति आने वाले समय में जिम्मेवारियां बहुत बढ़ जाएंगी, क्योंकि गवर्नमेंट को सब फ्रंट पे लड़ाई करनी है कि उसको अपने रेवेन्यूज को भी बढ़ाना है और एक्सपेंडिचर्स को भी रैशनलाइज करना है. और जितने भी बिजनेसेस हाउसेस हैं सबको उन्हें सपोर्ट देनी है और आम जनता को भी उनको सपोर्ट देनी है. साधन गवर्नमेंट के पास लिमिटेड है. गवर्नमेंट आने वाले समय में इस प्रोफेशन में, और हमारे साथ सभी जुड़े हुए एडवोकेट्स और दूसरे जो प्रोफेशन है, हमारे सिस्टर प्रोफेशंस हैं, उन सबको हमारे साथ लेकर वो चाहेगी कि इस देश के निर्माण में नई चुनौतियों के साथ और नई अपॉर्चुनिटीज के साथ हम सब मिलके काम करें गवर्नमेंट के साथ, और जो ये चैलेंजिंग टाइम है उसको अपॉर्चुनिटीज में और डेवलपमेंट के लिए टर्न करें. तो मैं चाहता हूं कि ये जीएसटी जो टैक्स ऑफ इंडिया बनने वाला है कुछ सालों में, हमको इस पे जोर से अपनी पकड़ बनानी चाहिए और इसमें देश को और बिजनेस हाउसेस को सपोर्ट करना चाहिए. इन्हीं शब्दों के साथ मैं चाहता हूं कि आपको ये बड़ा यूजफुल रहेगा ये 10 दिन का कोर्स. तो इन्हीं शब्दों के साथ आप सबका स्वागत भी है और धन्यवाद भी है.
थैंक यू, थैंक यू. आई विल रिक्वेस्ट अजीत गोयल जी ओनली फॉर 10 सेकंड्स प्लीज.
नमस्कार साथियों, सीए विचार मंच की तरफ से मैं आप सभी का स्वागत करता हूं. और बहुत ज्यादा समय ना लेते हुए मैं कहूंगा कि ये कोरोना से हम सब अपने आप को सेफ रखते हुए, कोरोना से बहुत सारे चैलेंजेस भी हैं हमारे लिए और हम प्रोफेशनल्स के लिए बहुत अपॉर्चुनिटी भी आने वाली है. तो मैं खेमका जी और पूरी टीम से गुजारिश करूंगा कि एक सेमिनार हमारी चैलेंजेस एंड अपॉर्चुनिटीज फॉर प्रोफेशनल्स पे भी ऑर्गेनाइज करें. और मेरे ख्याल से 10 दिन का सेमिनार हम सबके लिए बहुत यूजफुल रहने वाला है. थैंक यू.
Thank you very much, Ajit ji. I will request all the panelists would be sharing their knowledge during this workshop intermittently, and all will be available for panel discussion on critical issues all the time. I will request all the panelists except Sushil ji to please keep their mic on mute mode. I will request Achal from Amritsar, Prachi and Pallavi and Vaibhav ji to kindly please take constant notes of whatever issues are being coming and been raised. Question and answers and chat box हमारे नीचे screens पे हैं, इन पे दोनों पे ही continuously questions and answers आते रहेंगे, but हम intermittently नहीं लेंगे, and when the speaker will permit, then only we will be taking up the questions. Speaker will only invite if then any additional view he is requesting any of the other panelists, then speaker will only request. I now request Shri Batra ji, Shri Raj Ke Batra ji, to say few words and give guidance on this occasion. Shri Raj Ke Batra ji, please unmute before you speak. Please unmute your mic, Batra ji. I think Batra ji नहीं है. मैं रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा सुशील जी से कि वे स्टार्ट करें अपना डेलिब्रेशन.
Thank you. Vinod ji, Manmohan ji, Jatinder, and my dear buddies Rakesh and Vineet, Suresh Agarwal, and the young crowd led by two ladies and Vaibhav. May God bless you all. We are in difficult times. I hope your families, your children are all safe and you are all staying safe. We are going to start this GST series, Back to Basics. What I am trying to do today, we are adding a little bit law into this. How do we read this GST law? What are the principles? Because my experience for last 3.5 years is that most of us are failing because we do not know how to read this GST law. It's not that difficult at all, but the reading itself makes a lot of difference. So with your permission, I had requested Manmohan, but we will not take up question answer today. We'll take up tomorrow together after we finish supply, and they'll keep noting the questions. We'll answer them tomorrow. So with this, we start this.
Sure, sir. Start कीजिए.
Yes. Now, before I start, there are important concepts to be noted. Sorry. We have to know that the government cannot levy any tax unless there are clear words in the act that a subject can be taxed. If, as per law, the GST cannot be levied, it cannot be levied on equitable grounds or estoppel or fiction or whatever you call. And we have to keep in mind Article 265 of Constitution of India, which says no tax except by authority of law.
Sushil sir, can you please share your screen?
What?
Sushil sir, sorry to interrupt. We are not viewing your screen. Can you share your screen again?
Okay.
There is a green button at the bottom by the name of share screen. Share your screen again, sir.
Okay.
Yes, it's visible now, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay. So I will again make it full.
Yes, sir.
It's okay.
Yes, sir.
But I'll because your photos are blocking my screen. What do you do?
You are visible, sir. Everything is fine.
No, but on my screen I cannot read it because your video photos are coming.
Okay, photos are coming. There is a minimize option at there. The third option on the photos, above photos, there are 3 options.
Mm-hmm.
So click on the one single line. 3 bars will be coming, or you can move the photos by dragging from here to the other place.
You can do that. Has he done that?
1 second, sir. I could not see those photos actually, sir. So you have to do that.
Okay.
Drag those photos anywhere else, sir. You can drag those photos.
I can't drag it. How do you drag it?
Or can minimize also.
सर जो फोटो वाला फ्रेम है उसके टॉप बार पे जाइए, ब्लैक बॉर्डर पे,
Click on the center button.
and click on the center button.
Okay, it's done. Is okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, we have few legal principles. How do we go and read the basics and the basics of the Act? The first thing is charging section. I'm not going to read these slides, but I'm only saying the charging section is the basic of any text law. Unless there are express words in the charging section to create a tax liability, the state or parliament or center cannot collect tax. And I have given some Supreme Court judgments you can go through if you want to. Now, on definitions, I'm extremely particular. We have more than 200 definitions in the CGST Act and the IGST Act, and majority of the definitions in this law are inclusive definitions. Wherever the word means exists, that is, the definition is exhaustive. Only what is written in that particular definition can be understood. That definition, beginning with a means, cannot be expanded to include anything else. However, if the definition is inclusive definition, the scope is unlimited. There is no limit to what it can include. Therefore, all my friends, whenever you read a definition, first you have to see whether this is exhaustive definition, inclusive. Most of the GST definitions are inclusive definitions, especially the important like business, consideration. These are inclusive definitions. Therefore, we should be very careful that if we read a definition, whatever words are expressed in section 2, wherever that word is used in the act, it will have the same meaning what is given in the definition. We cannot change that word. So if it means that meaning is restricted, if it's inclusive, then we have section 2 opening sentence unless the context otherwise provides. Then there are non-obstinate clauses and there are provisions which we are going to today subject to other provisions. If there is a non-obstinate clause, for example, notwithstanding anything else contained in the above section or in the act or in the rules, this means that particular clause will override on anything else in that particular section. That is the final law. If a law says notwithstanding, like for example, section 9.3, notwithstanding. So notwithstanding has an overriding effect on the main section. If a section says subject to other provisions, that means that particular section must yield to the sections to which it is subject. It is very important when you apply the harmonious construction rule to understand these concepts before we start reading GST. Schedule. Most of us don't read schedules. And I must tell you, my friend Rakesh Garg taught me, actually he taught me how to read a schedule. Schedule is a part of an enactment. The lawmakers create schedules to minimize the sections and rules. So they have created schedules. And GST has, especially section 7, what we're going to discuss today, the most important 3 schedules, the source of litigation. Meaning of a proviso. Whenever a section is followed by a proviso, it can either create an exception or it can restrict the scope of the main section. So we have to see. Proviso independently does not exist. It has to be read in conjunction with the main section. Therefore, if a proviso restrict the meaning of the section, the proviso will prevail. If proviso create an exception, even then it will prevail. But independently, it will have no existence. Explanation. In many of the sections in GST, we have explanations. For what reason, I don't know. It was a new law. There would have been no need for explanation. But maybe after the draft act, they had a lot of other thoughts. So explanation can explain the meaning of the main section in a simple man language. Explanation becomes a part of the section. Again, explanation has no independent existence. You can always read the PPT if you want to read more. Circulars. There is a lot of difference between circulars and a notification. Notification in law have a statutory force. It's a part of the act itself, whereas circulars are interpretation given by the authorities. Any circular given by any authority in GST will bind the officers, and it will be impossible for the government to go back on that circular and say, we issued a wrong circular. As long as the circular exists on the statute book or in our files, that has beneficial impact on us, and this is binding upon all the authorities. There are 2-3 Supreme Court judgments. I'm not going to read them. Charging and machinery provision. You know, we have, for example, Section 9. Section 9(1) says subject to Section 9(2), whereas Section 9(3) comes where government is given a power to issue notification, etc., etc. Similarly, charging section we had in VAT Act. Section 9(1) was subject to Section 9(2). All other 9 subsections were creating calculations. You will get this, you will not get this. Like in ITC, Section 16 is the charging section. In my view, all other subsections like 17, etc., are machinery provision that adjust the input tax liability available to a taxpayer. Therefore, when you read a charging section in any context, either levying a tax or giving a benefit or whatever, charging section basically we understand which creates a tax liability. But in common parlance, there can be a substantive provision. In my view, this could be held to a charging section and machinery provision that helps us to compute कैसे करना है, जी आपको मिलेगा या नहीं मिलेगा, वो machinery provision बनाते हैं. दोनों की interpretation अलग-अलग किस्म से की जाती है. Charging section की construction बड़ा seriously होती है कि जो उसमें लिखा है वही आपको लाना है. Charging section का अगर गवर्नमेंट ने मुझे टैक्स लगाना है कि मैंने सप्लाई की है, फॉर कंसिडरेशन की है और सप्लाई की डेफिनेशन में आती है, till it is proved, I cannot be taxed. For example, we have a hot issue on director services. We will discuss whether this is coming in charging section or not coming in charging section. Therefore, charging section are construed very strictly. Now, this definition clause, very few people, including Sushil Verma, they read the opening part of section 2 of any enactment. See the underlined bold words, unless the context otherwise requires. So whatever definition, whatever words are explained, if in a particular section we find a dichotomy, हमें लगता है कि उसका ये मतलब वहां नहीं मिलता और उसका मतलब कोई और निकलता है, फिर उस डेफिनेशन के आगे हमको ये फ्रेज प्रीफिक्स करना है, unless the context otherwise requires, exempt supply will mean this, for example, again, employer-employee services are exempt, no supplies. Can we say this is exempt supplies? We will discuss this when we come to that level. Therefore, अगर किसी सेक्शन में हमको लगता है कि जो डेफिनेशन सेक्शन 2 में दी गई है उसके हिसाब से वो ठीक फिट नहीं बैठती है, then the lawmakers have covered that kind of a conflict by adding the word unless the context otherwise requires. Definitions. I have picked up only those definitions which are necessary for section 7, 8, and 9. Other definitions are not picked up. Actionable claim. Actionable claim shall have the same meaning as assigned to it in section 3 TPA. The section 3 is quoted below. Now, again, we have to read this law like this. Actionable claim is not defined in the Act. We are borrowing a definition of Transfer of Property Act by way of section 3. Therefore, this is actionable claim, whatever is written there. We will use this actionable claim when we come to schedule 3. Business includes, I've highlighted this. So whatever instances are given, around 12 instances here, business could be many more activities because definition is inclusive. So once you are confronted with inclusive definition, it will have endless proposition to be included in the category of business, other than what is written here. Composite supply and mixed supply. Again, my friends, I tell you, you must read definition, don't jump to sections. For example, section 2, subsection 30 defines composite supply. It says means, not includes. So means only what is written here, this is the only composite supply. It says supply, that's section 7, made by a taxable person to a recipient defined, supply defined, taxable person defined, consisting of two or more taxable supply. Taxable supply is also defined. Of goods or services are also defined, or both, or any combination thereof, which are naturally bundled and supplied in conjunction with each other. Now, when these grammar words are used in conjunction, if Rakesh Garg has written a book long back, I always have that book. In conjunction means and. This can have many meanings. In the context of this particular definition, it's and. Now I've highlighted the word means two or more taxable supplies. These taxable word is missing in mixed supply. So therefore, don't jump to both are same definition, the same. They are not same definition. They are not same concepts. They're totally different. Now, if we see this 4-line definition, it has used 7 words which are defined in section 2. So whatever word is written, which is defined in the act, it can have no other meaning whatsoever. Consideration. We all have read Contract Act. I mean, I always had a fancy for Contract Act, but when I read this consideration, it really belies how can you have this kind of a definition. So consideration in relation to. Now this in the course of, in relation to, they are very big phrases in law. And these have been used very much in GST law, virtually in every section. So consideration in relation to supply of goods or services. Only when there is a consideration which you receive consequent to supply of goods or services, that only consideration is covered by section 2, subsection 31. That is the meaning of in relation to. Any payment made or to be made, whether in money or otherwise. Money is also defined here. In respect of, in response to, or for the inducement of. All these 3 phrases are defined by Supreme Court. I wish we were doing only this for 10 days. We could have spent 10 days on this particular chapter. In respect of, in response to, or inducement. So whatever category of getting the money you can think of, it is covered by the 3 phrases. The supply of goods or services of both, whether by the recipient or by any other person. Remember, in Contract Act, consideration could move from a third person, Indian Contract Act, not English Contract Act. In Indian Contract Act, consideration could move from third person. So here they have borrowed that particular definition. They say whether payment to be made by recipient or by any other person, but shall not include. So there is only one exclusion, that is any subsidy given by central government or a state government. You know, in recent we had cases, the subsidies given by companies to telephone dealers. I always had this view, how can this be a subsidy? So to overcome those discussions and debates and case law, the lawmakers have specified only subsidy which is given by central government or a state government. They should have written union territory also, but maybe they don't have power to give subsidies. So central government or a state government, that will be excluded from consideration. That is, if you receive 10,000 rupees and 2,000 rupees is subsidy, the consideration is 8,000 rupees. Now, this is a huge, huge word where we come on the category of whether interest can be taxed or not, blah, blah, blah. I'm not getting into interest discussion, but this phrase, the monetary value of an act or forbearance. Again, an act is defined. Act means a positive act, either doing it or not doing it. Positive act, value of any act or forbearance in respect of, in response to, or the inducement of the supply of goods, services, or both, whether by the recipient or any other person, but shall not include any subsidy so and so, provided that a deposit given in respect of the supply of goods or services or both shall not be considered as payment made for such supply unless the supplier applies such deposit as consideration for such supply. Recently, I had a little issue with one of my friends, not a professional opinion, whether if I give a deposit of 10 lakh rupees and I take it back, whether this will attract any GST liability in terms of interest. We will discuss this particular issue. Remember, this is covered here. Exempt supply, my dear friends, this is going to cause biggest litigation in the country. Exempt supply is huge, huge definition. Again, means it is not an inclusive definition because it cannot be, because it covers virtually everything. Supply of any goods or services or both, which attracts nil rate of tax. That is, otherwise it was taxable. So the lawmakers have said, now this is a nil tax, or which may be wholly exempt from tax under section 11 notification or section 6 IGST, and includes non-taxable supply. That is section 9, or those supplies which are not held to be supply of goods or services or both. So exempt supply, we should always remember, wherever the exempt supply, for example, input tax credit, the common ITC you have to reverse for exempt supply. So you will have to continue a client's return and see what could be categorized as exempt supplies, which is a part of your aggregate turnover. Turnover, of course, is not defined. Aggregate turnover is defined. So there, ITC will have to be reversed, whether we like it or not. Goods. Again, this is not a definition which we have studied in Central Sales Tax Act or VAT laws. It is totally different. Goods means every kind of movable property. So movable property is not defined here. So whatever is not fixed, it can deem to be movable. Vineet, you can correct me. Vineet? Hello?
Sushil, no, carry on, you are going fine, sir.
Okay. You can correct me, movable properties which is not immovable.
Obviously, sir.
Other than money and securities. So there is an exception from goods created, money and securities, but includes actionable claim. We did the first definition, growing crops, grass and things attached to or forming part of the land, which are agreed to be severed before supply or under a contract of supply. Now remember, just see the force of this for people who sell grass, people who sell standing crops, etc., etc. So what is excludes is money and securities. And what is money and security? Money is defined by section 2, subsection 75. I've just put it here. Money means, I need not go through it. I think we all know what the money means. It's the same definition here. Securities. Securities they did not define. They picked up the definition of section 2 of Security Contracts Regulation Act. Security shall have the same meaning as assigned to. When these definitions are borrowed, my dear friends, in a particular enactment from other enactment, then these will have full consequences. That is, if under a Security Contract Regulation Act 56, something is not held as security by court, similarly, it will also not be so held in GST law. That is the meaning of adoption of definition by reference of another act. The securities in Security Contract Regulation Act is defined as securities include, again, inclusive definition, not a means definition. Shares, scrips, stocks, bonds, debentures, debenture stock or other marketable securities of a like nature in or of any incorporated company or any other body corporate. Now this is inclusive of definition. If there can be something more, can come in this kind of a category, that will also be deemed to be security for the purpose of section 2 for this particular definition. Local authority. There are a lot of advanced rulings of infrastructure में, इसमें बहुत problems हुई हैं लोगों को. Hundreds of crore के लोगों ने टैक्स दिए. मेरे दो क्लाइंट ने 17 करोड़ में टैक्स दिया हैदराबाद में by adopting this, by not understanding this definition. Again, remember, local authority means that this is not an inclusive definition. A lot of people have confused by some service tax judgments or some other judgments. No, those judgments have no relevance whatsoever. If they were not interpreting this definition, the judgments will have no play in any court of law. So you have to understand, local authority means this. So only these authorities mentioned here will be deemed to be local authority. Therefore, in a particular circular where 81 services have been declared exempt, given to or by the government, they will be applicable only to these local authorities. I'm not reading this definition, you can always read it. Mixed supply. We did the composite supply, now mixed supply. Mixed supply means 2 or more individual supplies, not taxable supplies. That is the beauty. If we understand the fine distinction, we will never commit a mistake. We need not go through any advanced ruling. If we understand the concept, composite supply presupposed 2 or more taxable supply. Mixed supply here means 2 or more individual supplies. It could be a tax-free. It will be taxed again. For example, an illustration in given, if by a single lease deed, I'm quantifying a single lease deed, you give two properties, one for residence, one for running a commercial printing press. It is quoted in Rakesh Garg's book. I'm taking his name. Now that becomes a mixed supply on whole thing. You're allowed to pay 18%, including residential, which is otherwise exempt. So mixed supply means two or more individual supply of goods or services, or any combination thereof. There the word or both is not there. Please remember, or both word is not there here. It said or any combination thereof. So this also have a legal significance. So what is the difference between or both or any combination thereof? We will discuss when we come to section 8. Non-taxable supply means the supply of goods or services or both which is not liable to tax under this act or under IGST Act and Service Tax, IGST Act. Non-taxable territory means the territory which is outside the taxable territory. That is, GST is applicable to entire India, including J&K. If anything is done outside India, that becomes a non-taxable territory. I'm not saying that there will be no tax on these issues, but only for the purpose of definition is non-taxable territory. Principal supply. Again, remember, I always say this act may be loosely drafted, but whatever they have drafted, a good stuff is good stuff. Like composite supply uses this term, principal supply. Only composite supply uses this word, principal supply. So they have defined supply, they have defined composite, they have defined principal supply before section 8 is applied. ये कौन सा tax लगेगा उसके ऊपर? Again, principal supply means not inclusive, means the supply of goods or services, or both words are not there. We have to be very careful when we read definitions. Which constitutes the predominant element of a composite supply and to which any other supply forming part of that composite supply is ancillary. For example, you go for AMC. AMC, our purpose is the principal supply is AMC. If any parts are used, they are ancillary. So as per law, if it's 18%, tax rate will be 18%, notwithstanding the parts could be 28%. So we'll discuss this, but definition we should keep in mind. Now, let me tell you, I read this definition of services at least 10 times since yesterday. I'm honestly telling you, I had never read this definition from this angle, except when this lecture I had to give. Services means, so business is inclusive definition. Goods, inclusive. Services means anything other than goods, money and securities. So anything, any payment you receive for any damn thing, it is deemed to be included in service. That it means, but includes activities relating to use of money or its conversion by cash or by any other mode from one form, currency or denomination, to another form, currency or denomination, for which a separate consideration is charged. I remember when I was reading this circular given on interest part, where they define those particular interest of 28 June 17. There they did not, though they wrote this language, but they did not specify the section. So today when I read this section, though I didn't have the circular in my home, but I remember this definition is very important. Services. Taxable person means a person who is registered or liable to be registered under section 22 or section 24. Voluntary registration and to increase taxable quantum, or 24, those 13 circumstances where you must take registration. So both are taxable persons. Whether you take a registration, whether you take a voluntary before taxable quantum, after taxable quantum, it's compulsory registration, or you do any of the acts mentioned in section 24, reverse charge, etc., 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 you are liable for registration. Taxable supply. Can you believe this act has defined taxable supply? Taxable supply means a supply of goods or services or both. Again, the words or both are here, which is leviable to tax under this act. So something which is not leviable to tax under this act cannot be taxed. Taxable territory, we know, works contract. Now, this is where section 8 composite supply or mixed supply come into play. Works contracts is the biggest definition of a composite supply, but here works contract definition not only was restricted to only immovable properties in relation to immovable property, but also these 13 contracts only, because this definition means the definition. Works contract means a contract for building, construction, etc., etc., etc. All these words are defined by Supreme Court. I will tell Manmohan that whenever you have 2 days time, do this infrastructure. This will do a lot of good to the industry and to the government and for the tax collection, because many people do not know this works contract at all. I can honestly tell you, out of 100 professionals, not more than 5 will be able to answer what is works contract, including Sushil Verma. Since I do work only in this line, so I know a little bit more than others. So means a contract for building, construction, fabrication, completion, erection, installation, fitting out, improvement, etc., etc., of any immovable property wherein transfer of property in goods, whether are goods or some other form, is involved in the execution of such contract. So Article 366(29)(ab), that is 46th Amendment, was done away with in GST law. Now, can they do it or can they not do it? Some constitutional experts will understand. But as far as we are concerned, we are reading this law. Whether can 46th Amendment be overruled by a definition in a new law which draw the strength from a constitutional provision, especially when that particular article exists in the Constitution even today. Okay, friends, so I've taken around 20-25 minutes on this because I think it will do a world of good to us in all remaining 9 days. Section 9 is the charging section of GST Act. It's a very beautifully drafted section, I must tell you. I have not seen a charging section like this in any tax law. It also tells you valuation. How will you do a valuation for a particular taxable supply? The taxable in GST supply of goods and services both. Now, in VAT Act, you had a sale. In excise, you had a manufacturing. Service tax, you had a providing of service. And a lot of other acts have different taxable events. But income tax, you had income. But for GST, they have clubbed all these taxable events. Whatever acts were submerged in GST law, they are all given word one supply. That is why Section 7 is the essence of GST. The more time we spend on this, better we will learn the remaining provisions of GST. So taxable event is supply of goods or services or both. That is the taxable event. That is, if anything you do which is not exempt under GST law, if it's exempt, we need not bother. If it's a non-taxable territory, we need not bother. But if you anything which is covered by Section 7, then you are in charging section. Rates, there are schedules given to you for goods or services or both until the combination of goods and services have been declared, service like works contract and restaurants. All other things either will fall in works contract, Section 2119, or composite supply or mixed supply. There cannot be any third category in GST law. Section 9. Let's spend 2 minutes reading this section. It's very important, especially when you do 9.3 tomorrow, which is a fantastic person, Sandeep Garg is doing tomorrow, 9.3. 9.1, subject to provision of Section 9.2. 9.1 is subject to 9.2. That is, if at all you do a reconciliation of Section 9.1, you have to do only with 9.2. 9.3 is independent. 9.3 does not refer to 9.1 or 9.2. Therefore, reading the law under these circumstances will help us arrive at a better proposition in our mind when we do our own work. Subject to, I told you definition clause, what does it mean is subject to? A provision which is subject to shall always remain to a provision to which it is subject. Subject to provision, there shall be levied a tax called the Central Goods and Service Tax on all the word used is all. So unless there is an exemption, any money you receive in the bank or any money accrued to you or anything receivable you shown in the balance sheet shall be deemed to be covered by supply. all intrastate supplies of goods and services both, except, now this is an exception, except on the supply of alcoholic liquor for human consumption. It is not industrial alcohol. There are people I know, 2 people I know, who mistook this and did not show the sale in their returns. They say they alcoholic hai. No, industrial is industrial purposes. That's why they specified the per human consumption on the value determined under section 15. So the valuation part is also given writing charging section. That's why it's beautiful section. And as such rates, no exceeding 20% as may be notified by government on the recommendations of the council. Now, we lawyers, at least I will always do, if a tax is reduced, it's okay. If it's increased, I would like to see recommendation of GST council before the notification was issued. Any post facto approval of GST council member is not envisaged by GST law. Approvals have to give, that is how notification will come. May be notified government on the recommended GST council. GST council must recommend, only then a notification should come into play. And collected in such a manner as may be prescribed. Now, section 9 basically deals with a forward charge. If I must charge tax. But they have used the word as may be prescribed. As may prescribe means they have the power under 9(3) to subject a particular supply to a reverse charge as well. So I do not see any conflict between 9(1) and 9(3) as far as the collection of tax at rates recommended by GST council is concerned. Whether it's forward or alcoholic, forward or reverse, both are in the manner as may be prescribed. This is my view. The central tax, petroleum, we are not bothered, we will forget it. Section 5, same thing. 9(3), we are not dealing, I'm not dealing. Now we come to scope of supply. Now this is huge. I'm just going to read these 6 lines, which I have written myself. Goods as well as services have been defined in GST law. The definition of service we have seen, the definition of goods we have seen. Money and security is accepted, everything else included, the inclusive definition, and services means, and whatever is excluded there. The taxable event in GST supply of goods or services are both. So till supply is made, there cannot be any taxable event. For example, Vineet Bhatia gives me an order, Mr. Verma, sell me 10 Apple X10 phones. I buy the phones. By quoting Vineet Bhatia to a supplier, I am buying for Vineet Bhatia. I keep the phones with me till I supply, not tax. So I must make a supply. The Constitution defines goods and service tax as any tax on supply of goods or services or both, except tax on supply, etc., etc. State governments have separate, central government and state governments have simultaneous power to levy GST on intrastate supplies. A lot of people have been writing articles, I have read few of them, where they say, state government, central government, they cannot levy taxes. The answer is yes, they can. There is no bar. Only in case of IGST, Parliament only has the power, exclusive power to deal with tax supplies. Section 7. Section 9 I read because it refers Section 7. Now if you go back to Section 9, let's go back. Now Section 9 does not refer Section 7 at all. If you see, if you have your screen, I can't see you guys. It doesn't refer Section 7 at all. It only says, they shall be levied tax on all intrastate supplies. Now, since supply is defined in Section 7, we say Section 7 almost, if I can use the word, a collateral charging section to Section 9. So till something is called a supply in Section 7, Section 9 is a dead number. Section 9 का कोई मतलब नहीं है. जब तक कोई भी चीज आप Section 7 में नहीं लाएंगे, Section 9 attraction नहीं होता. That is the meaning of charging section. तो Section 7 की supply prove करे डिपार्टमेंट, या हम कन्विंस हो कि सप्लाई बनती है तो हमें Section 9 में टैक्स देना है. अगर सप्लाई नहीं बनती है, हम टैक्स नहीं देंगे. Director services are one example. Many of my friends, including Vineet, Gaurav, Rakesh have a feeling that they are not services because they are in Schedule 1 to do exclusion clause. If that is the view, then it is not a supply, the Section 9 has no meaning. But if that view is incorrect, then this is all taxable. Now, for the purposes of this Act, here also we have to have two more concepts. Many times the lawmakers use the word for the purpose of this section. So if something is defined for the purpose of that particular section, the definition gets restricted to that section only. That definition cannot be enlarged to understand the meaning. For example, I give you a beautiful example. Section 12, time and, how do you receive time and for supply of receipt of goods and services? They say goods are received when invoice entry is made, etc. Now that particular phrase cannot be picked up and used in section 16 to say, look, I have put my invoices in my books, therefore goods are deemed to have been received. A lot of people have taken this view. I completely disagree, because section 12 deals with a particular marginal handing, and the particular concept is given only for that particular section. So that particular explanation in section 12 cannot be mean it is for the purposes of this Act. If the phrase was used for the purposes of this Act, then we will not have any dispute about fake ITCs in this country. But section 7 says for the purposes of this Act. The expression supply includes. That is where the problem is. Once you are dealing with an inclusive definition, there's a huge area of taxation, of disputes. And so we are having now all forms of supply of goods or services or both. I'm reading the law for my clarity and for your clarity. For all forms of supply. Now, this is all forms means what? It could be first contract, it could be right to use, it could be agreement to sell, it could be actual sale, it could be a transfer. So there are all forms of supplies defined in the Act itself. Therefore, we say all forms of supply of goods or services or both. Now, goods or services are defined, or both are not defined, or both can appear only in works contract or in composite or mixed supplies. It cannot happen anywhere else, but or both word is not defined, such as sale, such as. What is such as? There are examples, such as sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease, or disposal made or agreed to be made for a consideration. For example, insurance company disposes scrap goods. They are disposing the goods. They are not transferring. This is being disposed of by an action or whatever. By a person. Now they are not using the word taxable person. By using the word person. Person is defined in the Act. It includes 18 categories of people. I'm not putting a definition because for my presentation it was not relevant, but I've highlighted the word person. Section 7 does not use the word a dealer or a taxpayer or taxable person, taxable taxpayer, registered taxpayer, the phrase used in the Act. Consideration by a person in the course or furtherance of business. Again, in the course or furtherance of business, the phrase is not defined in any law. Companies Act uses it, they don't define it. Labor law uses it, workmen's compensation, they don't define it. But literally, I had the judgment, but I'm not quoting it here because we will have limited time. In the course or furtherance of business means in the course, whatever you are manufacturing or trading, whatever you do connected with that, that's in the course of. Or furtherance, advertising, sales promotion, outsourcing of supplies, they are all in the furtherance of business. So anything you do, you supply or do anything else which is for a consideration, then it should be in the further course of business. For example, as an individual, I go and sell my gold. I'm not doing this in the course of further business. Therefore, for me, it is not a supply. It's a supply I'm delivering. But as per section 7, this is not a supply. Therefore, I am out of section 9. But if I'm a person who's a dealer in old garments, like you have Chandni Chowk, who buy and sell old ornaments, they are doing in the course of business or furtherance of business. Therefore, they will be liable to be included in section 7 and subject to section 9. Second, import of services for a consideration, whether or not in the course or furtherance of business. So this is a kind of loose drafting by lawmakers. It's an exception. But we take it, since they have given a subclause to it, import. Import is defined in law. Import means any goods or services which we bring from outside India into India. If we do it for a consideration, even if it is not for in the course of or furtherance of business, it will be taxable. The activity specified in Schedule 1 made or agreed to be made without consideration. Now, these are exceptions, huge exceptions. So even if you don't get money, if any activity is covered by Schedule 1, it shall remain taxable. That is, it will remain supply as per section 7. Where certain activities of transaction constitute a supply in accordance with the provision of subsection 1. Now, subsection 1 includes all this, A, B, C, D. They are not referring a 1A, 1B or 1C. They are saying complete section 1. 1A was substituted later, with certain activities or transactions. Now again, activities or transactions, they are not defined. It could be n number of activities, n number of transactions. Constitute a supply in accordance with provisions of subsection 1, they shall be treated either, now the lawmakers have used the word treated, not deemed to be treated. It is not a deeming fiction. It is a word, they shall be treated either as a supply of goods or supply of services as referred to in Schedule 2. Gentlemen, I want you to be very careful when we read the law, because I'm a lawyer, I read the law. They shall be treated, it's a mandate. There is no deeming fiction here. When we say deemed to be, there can be a lot of ifs and buts. Here the lawmakers have used a very imperative English language. They shall be treated. Now we come to notwithstanding non-obstinate clause. So what is non-obstinate clause? I told you, a clause which will override section 7.1 and 7.1a. So notwithstanding any transaction may fall in 7.1 A, B, C, D or 1A. Subsection 2 shall override these two. Section 7, these two subsections. Notwithstanding anything contained in section 1. Now they do not use the word 1A. They are using only 1. Subsection 1A has an independent existence, but subsection 2 to section 7 does not subject notwithstanding clause to 1A. Activities or transactions specified in Schedule 2 or such activities or transactions undertaken by the central government, the state government or a local authority in which they are engaged as public authorities, as may be notified by the government on the recommendation of the council, shall be treated neither as a supply of goods nor supply of services. Now, this is huge, huge. We have to be here only. Forget any circulars, any interpretation, any articles. We all guys write to make money. This language is very clear. There is no ambiguity. Activities or transactions. If you go back to section 7.1, it does not use the word activities or transactions at all. These activities are used in section 1A. So notwithstanding anything contained in subsection 1, activities or transaction is specified in Schedule 3. Schedule 3 will define those transaction or activities. Such activities or transaction undertaken by central government, not by anybody working on behalf of these governments. A contractor will not be able to claim exemption. It's as simple as this. A state government or any local authority, the local authority is what? Which is defined in section 2. Since this local authority is defined, all those authorities which are mentioned in section 9 will have their meaning incorporated right here in local authority, in which they are engaged. Who are engaged? Central government, state government, or any local authority. They are engaged. They are means they are not engaging anybody. They are engaged as public authorities. The work is being done by them, not by any contractor. As may be notified by the government on the requirement, shall be treated neither as supply nor suppliers. For example, street maintenance service is a part of 243B, local authorities engaged. If they do, it's okay. If we engage Reliance to do it, well, it's taxable. There's no exemption at all. And there are, anyway, rulings have come, advanced ruling, appellate advanced rulings. High Court also accepted advanced rulings. So again, what we are reading is pure law. We are only trying to interpret this particular law based on our understanding of definitions and the interpretations of definition clauses. Since this is a notwithstanding clause, it's a non-abstenor clause, this shall prevail over 7.1. So if 7.1, we could have a different interpretation, because we lawyers can create any bloody interpretation by reading Supreme Court, High Court, we can do camouflaging and give an interpretation. But no, here no, because subsection 2 is dealing with a non-abstenor clause. So little Hindi, supply, GST Act के लिए supply में हम include करेंगे हर तरह की supply of goods or services, चाहे वो sale हो, transfer हो, barter हो, exchange हो, licensing करनी हो, rental करना हो, lease करना हो, और कोई भी goods का dispose करना हो, और agree to dispose करना हो, पैसे के लिए, consideration के लिए, by a person, not by a taxpayer, by any person, in the course or furtherance of business, provided वो आपका धंधा हो और उस धंधे को आगे चलाने के लिए आप काम कर रहे हैं. अगर कोई सर्विस आप कंसीडरेशन के लिए इंपोर्ट करते हैं, बाहर से आप मंगाते हैं, कोई सर्विस लेते हैं, चाहे वो आप बिजनेस के लिए थी या नहीं थी, वो सेक्शन 7 की सप्लाई मानी जाएगी, उसमें एक्सेम्पशन नहीं है. और एक्टिविटी जो शेड्यूल 1 में है, उनमें अगर आपको पैसे नहीं भी मिले, then as per valuation rules, fair market value or all other parameters shall be applied and value will be fixed. और शेड्यूल 2 कहता है कि जहां भी कोई एक्टिव ट्रांजैक्शन की जाती है जो सप्लाई की डेफिनेशन में आती है, जो हमने 7.1 में देखा है, उसको हम सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स और सप्लाई ऑफ सर्विसेज को ट्रीट करेंगे. Why is the schedule 2 necessary? Because there has been a lot of litigations, particularly on your software, whether this is goods or service. So TCS 5 judges decided what is this. So they have tried to make the law simpler कि ये चीज हम goods मानेंगे, ये service मानेंगे, so that there is no dispute. The importance of definition. See, TCS Tata Consider judgment of Supreme Court 5 judges, it was decided and tens of thousands of crores of tax liabilities were annulled only on the definition of goods. So that is the importance. Similarly, BSNL judgment, 39,000 crores worth of liabilities were waived off by Justice Rumapal on the ground. The electronic magnetic waves cannot be stored. Therefore, they cannot be goods. Goods must be able to store. So definition can go to this extent if we understand how to apply and read definitions. The rule is clear. If a word is defined, अगर किसी word की definition section 2 में है, अगर वो word पूरे एक्ट में कहीं भी लिखा गया है, तो उसका मतलब सिर्फ वही होगा जो सेक्शन 2 में लिखा है. सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने क्या कहा किसी एक्ट में, किसी ट्रिब्यूनल ने, किसी हाई कोर्ट ने, उसका हमें कोई लेना देना नहीं है. Because the word defined in the act cannot have any other meaning except to the extent as defined in the act. Now we come to subsection 3. Subject to provisions. Again, subject to, remember, non-obstinate, subject to. Now this section is subject to provisions of section 7(1)(a)(2). The government may on recommendation of council notify the transaction that are to be treated as supply of goods not as by so and so. That is, we will do it. They have exercised this power already. So section 7, 4 चीजें जरूरी हमें prove करना है. Supply of goods or services or both होना चाहिए. Supply should be made for a consideration unless supply is a supply without consideration also. Supply should be made in the course of furtherance of business, and supply should be a taxable supply. Now, here there is also a catch. All supplies are taxable. Only when we get exemption, they become non-taxable. That is why we read the definition of exempt supply and non-taxable supply. So non-taxable supply are those supplies which are not subject to tax under GST law. Therefore, we say to invoke section 7 and create a charge in section 9 for payment of GST by forward charge or by a reverse charge, you have to prove this was a taxable supply. Schedule 1. we will do at length where I think is necessary. जहाँ बिल्कुल simple चीज है उसको हम ज़्यादा लंबा नहीं करेंगे. Permanent transfer of disposal of business assets where input as credit has been availed on such assets. Now the word used is permanent. I really fail to understand why they use permanent. Permanent means where the goods cannot come back. That is the meaning of permanent. If you keep a right to receive back, for example, right to use goods, that is not a permanent transfer of goods because you have a right to take back the goods after the particular agreed period is over or on any default. So therefore, permanent transfer. Transfer means where you transfer in rum. कि आपने आप बाजार में गए 10 रुपए का पेन खरीदा उसने पेन आपको दे दिया परमानेंट ट्रांसफर हो गई और डिस्पोजल इंश्योरेंस कंपनी when they dispose of the goods they also do permanent disposal of business assets where input as credit has been availed on such assets. So this will be a supply even if made without consideration. Supply of goods are sort of both related persons. Related person defined है हमारे स्लाइड में भी इसको थोड़ा बाद में करेंगे मैंने इसको थोड़ा कुछ और भी लिखा हुआ है. We will wait for this clause 2. Gifts 50,000 रुपए के अगर कम देते हैं आप पर एम्प्लॉय को एक साल में तो उनको हम सप्लाई नहीं मानते तो उस पर टैक्स नहीं लगेगा. Now again let us presume somebody has asked me that we are buying some gifts worth 45,000 rupees, 100 gifts from a person who is a non-taxable dealer, non-taxable. What will happen? I said nothing. You'll pay no tax because the non-taxable person is not supposed to pay GST. So if at all any gifts have to be given, this can be planned so that you can avoid GST because there'll be no input tax credit available to you on this. Supply of goods by a principal, agent, stock transfers. You know, if I do a stock transfer, I must pay tax on whatever 90% value, whatever. Similarly, if my agent purchases goods in Lucknow on my behalf and transfer to me, he again has to make a supply and charge me tax. In both cases, input tax credit is available. 4, import of services by a taxable person. There is a lot of chaos in professional circle on this particular issue. Schedule 2.4 deals with import of services by a taxable person from a related person. We will tell you who is a related person, or from any of his other establishments. This is also defined. Associated enterprises establishment is also defined in section 2. I'm not putting definition. Rakesh, if you can see what section is this? Rakesh Gargji? Rakesh? Hello? Rakesh? Okay, he's not there.
I suppose Rakesh ji is not there.
Anyway, if you can see associated enterprises subclause.
Section 2, subsection 12.
Okay, so thank you. So import of services by a taxable person from a related person or from any of his other establishments outside India, though they have not used the particular phrase, but this means this only, in the course or furtherance of business. It should be from a taxable person. Who is a taxable person? Who is liable to pay tax under Indian GST law. He's a taxable person. So if he procures only services, not goods, be clear, we are dealing with import of services only. This point 4 doesn't talk of any goods or both. From a related person or from any of his other establishments outside India in the course of furtherance of business. So if I'm importing a services, even being a taxable person, but which is unrelated to my business, well, this will not be a supply under section 7. Now, this is the way we as professionals have to approach a particular issue. If the issue comes within the 4 corners, this is a schedule. It's a part of section 7. Section 7 is a part of section 9. It's as good as the charging section itself. Schedule is a part of act. अगर इसमें हम आते हैं तो आपको टैक्स देना है, कोई इफ्त एंड बट्स नहीं है. सुशील वर्मा के पास किसी और लॉयर के पास जाने की जरूरत नहीं है, because courts are not going to change this law. आपने सर्विस इंपोर्ट की है, a taxable person हो, related person satisfy करते हैं या 212 सेक्शन कवर करते हैं, और in the course of business में आपने की है तो आपको टैक्स देना है. There's a judgment of ACC Supreme Court though in under Customs Act where drawings were imported, and the SSC said that the drawings cannot be subject to custom duty because they have nothing. They said no, Without this, you cannot run the machines. Therefore, you pay tax on this. And that is the judgment which overruled the main judgment of works contract and say this is the final law. Therefore, number 4 is very important. It's happening quite a lot in the country today. A lot of Chinese companies, I deal with 3 or 4, a lot of Chinese companies are doing this, taking the services from their Chinese counterparts. They receive emails, they receive opinions. We have told them, please pay reverse charge. Otherwise, you will be in trouble. They say, no, वो तो हमारी अपनी company है. अरे तो तुम्हारी company से deal कर रहे हैं वो लोग. So we have to be careful. Transaction between related parties. The first part is the law wants to be clear on valuation. कि 100 रुपए की चीज, income tax you have a transfer pricing issues. I don't do income tax, but I know a little bit of it. Thousands of cases are pending here and there. So this is a kind of that issue. Your valuation should be fair. Who is a related person? We should spend 2 minutes on this. Person shall be deemed to be related. So you may not be related. Now this is not shall be treated in the other act we saw in the particular schedule. Here the lawmakers have used shall be deemed to be treated if they fall under any of the following categories. Officer, director, you can read this, I think, and you not go it. We are not dealing with this concept. So if you satisfy any of these parameters, shall be deemed to be related. You may not be actually doing no work with them. But if you satisfy any of these conditions, sitting in India as a taxable person, and you import services from them, even without consideration for your business or in the course of business, you shall be deemed to be a related person. This I'm skipping, we have done this. Now, agency I have told you, whether agent receives goods on your behalf outside your state, he dispatches, he will take this as supply as a distinct person, charge tax, issue you tax invoice, get input tax credit, and when you stock transfer, we know what we do, input tax credit value, provided the valuation is fair. See, if valuation is not fair, if your valuation is questioned, there can be a lot of problems for input tax credit. Again, as a lawyer, I can say, "Hum aapko bacha lenge, ye kar lenge, wo kar lenge." But no, I don't advise my colleagues who are put a little less years than me. Do not try to flaunt law. Your client will get caught. So if there is a valuation rule, 90% or whatever, I think it's 90% of your list price, you cannot stock transfer less than this. Similarly, if your agent has procured for 100 rupees, which is section 15 consideration. What is section 15 consideration I call? Where consideration was only cash, there was nothing else. All other parameters of section 15 will be applicable for these kind of transfers also, except the original valuation can be at 90% or whatever the rule is. Therefore, this principal and agent, importing services we have done. Yeah, here also we can spend 2 minutes. It's a good slide. Permanent transfer of business assets where ITC has been availed on such assets. Permanent transfer of sale of business assets on which input tax has been availed will also be supplied, even if now business assets. So if there were personal assets, though you were a marine director of the company, this is not applicable at all. Has been availed will also be supplied even if there is no consideration received. GST is applicable to the sale of business assets only if does not apply to sale of personal land, building and other personal assets. Permanent transfers I have explained to you. Job work. Other day, I think when we were discussing this initial meeting, somebody raised this question. Job work is not permanent transfer because there's a right to call them back. Goods have to come back to you. Only when the limitation period gets exposed, the 1 year or 2 year, whatever the line periods are for job work, then it is deemed to be supplied. Then it becomes a permanent transfer. Donation of business assets or scrapping of disposal or any other manner other than as a sale for a consideration would also qualify as supply where input tax credit has been claimed. So if I have 1 lakh kilo of sugar with me and in COVID-19 I want to transfer, if I have claimed input tax credit, it will be supplied even if I am doing a charity. If I have not claimed input tax credit, I will be out of it. So this, I've read some charity articles. I think we should have explored these kind of issues a little more on those articles. Now we have done this. The small thing I wrote for you to bring in more clarity for you. Schedule 2, activities to be treated as supply of goods or supply of services. Again, I told you why so. So that we do not have litigation. We do not have litigation whether these are goods or services. If it's services, it's taxable. If it's goods, they're taxable as per particular schedules. Now, first says is transfer. Any transfer of title in goods is a supply of goods. Title means property in goods, ownership. And title means de jure title, legal title. If it's transferred, it's a supply of goods. Any transfer or right in goods or undivided right to use goods. Now, these are two things, not one here. Any transfer of right in goods or undivided share in goods without the transfer of title thereof is supply of goods, is supply of services. So पहले जहां आपने पूरा ट्रांसफर कर दिया वो हम सेल जिसे कहते हैं, उससे उन्होंने कह दिया गुड सप्लाई कर दिया आपने. अब दूसरा भी डीलिंग विद गुड्स ओनली, they are not dealing with any service. These things are not defined as service in any substantive provision of the Act. Only schedule is defining, they have the power in section 7 to define these activities and goods and services. So they have done so, issue notification. So they are all dealing with goods, whether you are transferring a right to use in goods or you are transferring an undivided share in goods without the transfer. Now what does it mean undivided share? Supposing I have a goods lying with Vineet Bhatia, 10 lakh rupees, the total goods are 40 lakh. 10 lakh goods used by a particular contract manufacturer for use. This is undivided share in goods. 40 लाख का मेरा कॉप्स है, मेरा विनीत भाटिया का 40 लाख के गुड्स पड़े, मशीनें पड़ी हैं फॉर एग्जांपल, उसमें मेरा अनडिवाइडेड शेयर 10 लाख का है. हमने वो 40 लाख का किसी कॉन्ट्रैक्ट लेबर को मशीनें साबुन बनाने के लिए दे दी. This is the phrase that covers this undivided share in goods without the transfer. See, any transfer of title in goods under an agreement. Now, under an agreement, under Contract Act, friends, agreement can be executed, executory. Now, the law does not say an express agreement. An agreement word, I don't think it is defined. I don't think it's defined in section 2. I'm not sure, but I think it's not defined. Under an agreement which stipulates. Now, when we use the word stipulates followed by agreement, it has to be an express agreement, because a stipulation cannot be proved orally. It is not possible in tax laws. If this which stipulates words were not there, I would have said this could be executory agreement as per Contract Act. But any transfer of title in goods under an agreement which stipulates that property in goods shall pass at a future date upon payment of full consideration as agreed, this will be a supply of goods. Agreement to sell under section 4 of sales of goods is also a sale. So is Central Sales Tax Act. An agreement to sell is covered by definition of sale in Central Sales Tax Act also. Now, if you say this three section, this clause 1, A, B, C. Now, gentlemen, all are dealing with goods. But lawmakers have told them that you will treat them as goods under these circumstances, as services under those circumstances. And all this will be subject to section 10, 12, time of supply, I think, which is doing somebody there on 26th to 27th. You must remember this. All these are subject to other sections of the, but they are taxable. We are saying as goods or as services. Land and building. Any lease, tenancy, encashment license to occupy land is a supply of services. Now, lease we know, tenancy we know, easement we know, license we know. License, for example, in a particular land there are minerals. I issue a license. You can use the land and I charge a fee, the compulsory mineral duties. Now, this is a consideration. Supposing there is nothing, even then it shall remain a supply of service. Any lease or letting out of the building including a commercial, industrial, or residential complex for business or commerce, either wholly or partly, is a supplier of service. Now, again, there are different words. Normally, we use the word rent deed. We do not use this word lease or letting out. Here they have used any lease or letting out. Letting out, definitely it could be a rent as well. Any lease or letting out of a building, including a commercial, industrial, or a residential complex. Now, when we say if you rent out a residential house, GST does not applicable. But when you rent out a commercial space in a residential complex, you know, a lot of gated societies, the ground floor are for shops, for malls, or for departmental stores. Though it's a residential complex, but a certain area has been approved for commercial business activities. This will remain a supply of service. So land and building, in all cases, whatever you can think of, it remains a service. Treatment or process. A treatment or process. Definition of job work. Job work is defined to include this only. Any treatment or process. Now, gentlemen, this treatment and process are chemical words. They have a meaning. Treatment is, for example, like I send my steel pipes. You galvanize the steel pipes. This is a treatment of steel pipes. The process is, I give you gray fabric. I tell them, convert this into a blue fabric to make jeans. This is a process. It is not a treatment. Therefore, the lawmakers have covered both the treatment of a particular thing or a process of a particular thing, and this shall on goods. Again, these are goods. We're dealing with goods. But they say, if you do these two things on the goods, we will deem this to be a supply of service. So unless the rate is specified, the general rate is 18%. Transfer of business assets. A lot of litigation is going to happen in companies on this particular issue. It's already happening, notices have come. Transfer of business assets, this is the marginal heading, where goods, again, first we're dealing with goods, where goods forming part of assets of a business. Now, if they are there in your balance sheet or they are in your books of accounts, they are not referring to balance sheet or books of accounts, but they must form part of your business assets wherever lying, are transferred or disposed of. Transferred means permanent, disposed of by any scrap or insurance, whatever you do, of by or under the directions of the person carrying on the business. By or under the directions. So Sushil Verma owns SV Legal. I have my business address. Supposing I am a taxable person in the GST law, I want to sell my assets. Now this is my control, under my direction being sold. Carrying on business so as no longer to form part of the assets. That is, if there were 100 commodity seeds, 20 are transferred or disposed of, and those 20 no longer remain a part of cluster of 100. So you are left with 80, not 100. Whether or not for a consideration, that is the beauty. Whether or not for a consideration, such transfer or disposal is a supply of goods by the person. So if Sushil Verma has 20 laptop computers, which I don't want to use, they are very old, I want to give it to a school or to an NGO for the way they can be used, I cannot say this is not supply of goods, because those goods were forming part of my assets of the business, and I have transferred to an NGO under my own directions, and I have taken them out from my business assets, and therefore it shall be deemed to be a supply of goods, even without, I'm not referring to valuation because it's not my scope. I cannot do it in any case in 2 hours. Next, where by or under the direction of a person carrying on a business, goods held by or under the direction of a person. If you see sub clause A, use the same phrase. That's why I'm not underlining these words here. By or direction of a person carrying on the business, goods held or used for the purpose of business are put to any private use or are used or made available to any person for use for any purpose other than a purpose of business, whether or not a consideration, the usage of making available such goods, supply or service. For example, the company has 20 Mercedes. शादी है, वो 10 गाड़ियां 2 महीने के लिए हमारे घर में आती हैं. This can be deemed to be a supply because these business assets are being sent to me for my use other than for the purpose of a business. Therefore, this will again on this also we are going to see a lot of litigation, though it's very difficult to prove. Where any person ceases to be this is a right of taxing closing stock in the Bengal Finance, Daily Sales Tax and VAT law, where any person, again remember, all lawmakers have used word is person, not a taxpayer, not a taxable person, not a registered person. They are just using the word person. Person ceases to be a taxable person, then any goods forming part of assets of any business carried on by him shall be deemed to be supplied by him in the course of person of a business immediately before he ceases to be a taxable person. Now, this is huge. So if there was a person who ceases to be a taxable person, I was a taxable person today, my taxable quantum was about 40 lakh or 20 lakh or whatever the limit. I cease to be a taxable person after 2 years, and I have goods forming part of a business that's worth 2 lakh. This will be deemed to have been supplied. So whether you show them as a sale or not, you have to pay tax as per law. You understand? This is, I first must be a taxable person and I must cease to be a taxable person at a later date. Then if there were any goods who were forming part of my assets of business, etc., then they shall be deemed to be supplied. Now again, when the lawmakers use a deeming fiction in law, it has full play as if this is an actual supply. For example, reverse charge, the definition in 9.3 or the section 2, as if the recipient was supplier of the goods himself, services of himself. The same case is here when you use a deeming fiction. Unless there are 2 exceptions given. The business is transferred as a going concern to another person. So for example, I was running a company where assets were 200 crores and I surrender my RC for cancellation for any ABC reason. I cease to be a taxable person. If I do not fall in any of these 2 exceptions given in subclause C of Schedule 2, all 200 crore goods will be deemed to be supplied and I must pay tax on the respective rates on valuation, again as per valuation rules, unless the business is transferred as a going concern. Now going concern is a huge concept. बहुत बड़ी concept है, GST में नई concept है, litigation होंगे क्योंकि the parameters put in GST law in this particular thing are very imperative. When you are selling as a going concern, if you are selling goods separately, other things separately, then this is not a going concern concept at all. So if you are transferring this entire 200 crores of business for goods, etc., after you cease to be a taxable person, then you will not be categorized as a supplier in Schedule 2. Or if the business is carried on by a personal rep who is deemed to be a taxable person. Now, this concept I have not understood, though of course I understand what does it mean, but law should have defined. So for example, there is a proprietor who dies. He's a big gold trader. His business has a gold worth 500 crores. Now, who will be his personal representative? Will the court decide or who? Supposing his wife carries on and she files for amendment. Yeah, I'm the personal representative of this person who has died. If the authorities accept, then again, this will not be deemed to supply. She can go on selling goods and pay tax. Supply of services. The following shall be, now again remember, again I'm coming on how to read law. In the earlier subclause C, the lawmakers used the word shall be deemed to be. Shall be deemed to be, because there were exceptions coming up. They use the word shall be deemed to be. Now they say the following shall be treated as supply of services, namely renting of immovable property. So no question. Forward, reverse, whatever you have to do you have to pay tax. Now, B, we will slowly touch on this, not much because this is a works contract is a huge concept. I don't want to get into this debate here. Construction of a complex. Construction. If you go back to section 2119, there was a definition of construction. And in this schedule 2 also, construction word is defined to include all those words mentioned in section 2119. That is why the subclause B uses the word construction. Construction of a complex building, civil structure, or part thereof. Including a complex or building intended for sale to a buyer. Now, construction of a complex, they don't say industrial, residential, or a housing society complex, labor colony complex, any kind of complex building. There is a difference between complex and building. Complex can comprise many things. A building is a simple building. Civil structure can be a simply civil structure, or a part thereof. Service tax वाले जो करते हैं उनको पता है क्या होता है civil structure. मैंने तो करता नहीं था. Or a part thereof, including a complex or building intended for sale to the buyer, wholly or partly, except where the entire consideration has been received after issuance of completion certificate where required by the communal authority or after the first occupation. जो मकान हम बेचते हैं, हम कहते हैं जो 10 लाख का था 1 लाख पहले आ गया, अब क्या करें? उसमें कुछ नहीं करना साहब, आपको 10 लाख पे टैक्स देना है. Now, a lot of people ask me questions, if I take a first occupation certificate from the authorities prescribed, charter engineer, etc. No, that is not the law. If a particular complex building, civil structure requires a completion certificate, then the first occupation certificate is irrelevant. That is why I have highlighted the word where required. So till you require, till you get it, your tax liability continues. That is, if you had 200 flats in a particular complex, let us presume all residential complex, including land value, you have taken money for 140 before you got completion certificate. 140 you must pay tax. Or 80 if you prove the entire consideration. I doubt there is any builder who does all this. He invests all the money and then sells it. The word used is entire. My dear friend, entire means जितना आपके agreement to sell था, जो price था, सारी कीमत आपको इन 2 events के बाद मिली. बाद में मिली है तो tax नहीं लगेगा. Now, again, the 2 more important words which most of us misreading it. If you read the second line of clause B, wholly or partly. It's not wholly, partly. Intended for sale to buyer, wholly or partly. That is, if you were a contractor, you are making 5 floors for yourself, 5 floors for the intending buyer, that is partly constructed. Therefore, this parameter, you apply for those 5 immediately. So this is supply of services. Now, there is no confusion now on this particular issue. There could be activities of works contract. There could be anything, but they have been declared to be services. Now, this is the explanation I was telling you. Wherever an explanation is appended in a particular section or below a particular clause, it will be having meaning only for this clause. So the definition which we are reading here has no application to any other section of the Act. The expression competent authority, we are not reading, you can read it. The expression constructions includes additions, alterations, replacements, or remodeling. Again, inclusive definition. I'm going on repeating. You must understand you are reading an inclusive definition or a restrictive definition. It's an inclusive definition, additions, alterations, replacements, remodeling, or any existing civil structure. So this is deemed to be construction. So if you are remodeling a housing society, आप उसको तोड़ के बनाते हैं, तो this law will be applicable there also. How will you pay tax? We don't know, but I will apply this law and tell you to pay tax. Temporary transfer or permitting of use of enjoy of any IPR. We remember the trademark, etc., etc. This will be, this shall be service, not deemed to be service. So software development will be a service. Now look at software. जहां TCS में थोड़ा इनको गड़बड़ लगे सारे वर्ड लगा दिए. Development, design, programming, customization, adaptation, upgradation, enhancement, implementation of IT software, information technology software. Information technology is not defined in the Act. Vineet, is it defined? Vineet?
What?
Vineet?
Anji, yes, Sushil ji.
Is the word defined? Information technology? No.
ITES services are defined.
No. The word information technology.
No, information technology word as such is not defined.
No, I know it's not defined. So remember, anything connected with software is deemed to be a service and you must pay tax. Agreeing to the obligation or refrain from an act or to tolerate an act or to a situation or to do an act. This is absolutely ridiculous part of section 2 subsection 31. A lot of people ask me on this liability to pay interest. There are so many things connected with interest, but I will restrict myself to circular. Those services relating to interest are exempt. 28 June 2017, I remember it's 12/12/7, and there is a clarification issued, I think sometime in June 2019. So those circular exempt certain interest issues. All other interest issues remain debatable. The only thing is interest should be earned or taken in the course of business. So if Sujit Verma has personal FDRs, this can never become a part of supply. But if you have business interest, etc., since these have been declared exempt supplies, those interest incomes, in my personal view, is only a view, not a law. It should be a part of your aggregate turnover in your return. I don't file returns, so I don't know, but it should be a part of your aggregate turnover. Composite supply. These are the two best examples of composite supply, and those have been declared as service. The following composite supply shall be treated as supply of services, works contract, as per clause 112 section 2, and so. So where is something has been declared as a service and the flat rate 5% or 18% or whatever the rates are. Today works contract, I think is 5% without ITC, or in certain cases, there are a lot of notifications on this particular issue. Now, your inputs may be anything. Your output is one. Now, whether you will get a refund on inverted duty structure for such issue or not, I'm sure Vineet will take her in under section 54. I'm not dwelling into this on this issue. So composite supply, these supplies are defined as services. Works contract, B, you have to be very careful before you say this is service. Supply by way of or as part of any service. So if you are supplying by way of any service, convention service, conference services, banquet hall facilities, or any other manner whatsoever of goods being food or any other article for human consumption or any drink other than alcoholic liquor so and so, where such supply of or service is for cash. That is, before you come into this category, before you say this is a composite supply, that is a combination of two or more taxable supply of goods or services or both. We read the definition. You must prove that these things were being done as a part of any service. Now you can't say that Mr. Verma came, मेरी दुकान पे आया था, उसने कहा 2 समोसे दे दो और 2 मेरे को drink दे दो. Well, buddy, you are not supplying any service. You are selling goods. So on drinks you pay whatever 28% tax or whatever, or बाकी पे tax दो. So only when the taxpayer can prove or the revenue can prove there was a service going on, and to provide the service, the composite supply of any item being food or any other article for human consumption or any drink as a composite supply was served, we say this will be deemed to be a service. Again, friends, you have to first read law. Do never read articles, never read advanced rulings, never read judgments till you understand the concepts. You know, Rakesh is sitting, Vineet is sitting, Manmohan ji is sitting. My friend Suresh Agarwal, though he keeps a low profile, he's a very, very good reader. We all debate for hours on a definition. I mean, we may still differ, but we go on debating definitions. Can we come here somehow? So when you read an article made by Sushil Verma or Vineet Bhatia or anybody, don't jump. That view could be totally wrong. That could be viewed to just write an article. But read the law. Schedule 3. Neither as supplier of goods nor supplier of services. These are the power given in 9.3. They have issued notifications. Services by an employee to the employer in the course of or in relation to his employment. Now, these are exempt services. I believe Rakesh was telling me sometime in February 2019, they issued a notification or a circular, I'm not sure. Okay, yes, these will not be taken as for the purpose of calculation of reverse ITC. And if these were exempt supplies, if these are and these are, then prior to Feb 19, your common ITC was to reverse for the total services of these people also. Unless we say the Feb 19 amendment was clarificatory in nature, which it is not. So when we say services by employer and employee, they say there'll be neither goods nor services. But it's a conditional exemption. In GST law, let me tell you, there is no general exemption in any provision. It's always a conditional. In everything there's a condition put. In the course of or in relation to his employment, a director gives his building for rent, or he's not giving any service as employee or director of the company. That's his independent capacity. So whether a director could be termed as an employee or as an employer, employer, Supreme Court judgments say they're employees. Supreme Court judgments also say directors are employers. I have those judgments with me. But all these services should spring from where? In the course of or in relation to his employment. Now, if director says, and I'm an employee, then employee is also defined in many enactments. But definitions of those enactments are not referred here. Those definitions were given in the context as for the purposes of the acts. Like many people tell me, payment of wages act में director को employee माना है, income tax में employee माना है. Who denies it? They were taken as employee for the purposes of computation of income or for following of labor laws. But many other acts, Supreme Court says they are employers. Therefore, when you reconcile section 9.1, section 9.1, where we say this is not a supply, it's not taxable supply under section 9 because it is not a part of section 7 at all. Schedule is a part of the act. So this schedule says this is neither a supply of goods nor a supply of service. So we say this is part of, out of section 9, section 7, therefore exempt, non-taxable, and non-taxable supplies are also exempt supplies. But then what about 9.3, where they issued the notification 13/2017? Okay, the services provided by director shall be subject to reverse charge. Now, director service provided by director to a company. The phrase is there. Rakesh Garg, thank you for your inputs. Directors to a company. Companies Act define director as an employee. Can we safely say directors are employee? My view is no. It requires a lot of debate. It's not going to end here till they issue notification. So therefore, if by whatever name called, if we treat them as an employee and services are provided to the employer in the course of in relation to his employment, this will be neither, this will not be taken as supply of service. Sale of land subject to clause 5. So if the property is sold including land after the entire consideration received, this is not supply of service or not supply of goods. But if it is done other way around, then this clause is not applicable. Actionable claims other than lottery, that is, actionable claims are no supply of goods or services other than lottery. Lottery, they recently allowed Kerala to tax them. Betting or gambling. So these things, they have not taken to be actionable claims. Actionable claims other than lottery, betting, gambling, actionable claims are in true definition of goods. However, Schedule 3, this particular schedule which we are reading, provide that actionable claims other than lottery and gambling shall be neither goods or nor services. So if you are not dealing with lottery, betting and gambling, an actionable claim as per Section 3 Transfer Property Act, given in Definition Act, if they are there and you receive any money for this, then this will not be taken as a supply of goods nor services. Supply of goods. The following shall be treated as supply of goods. Supply of goods by any unincorporated association or body of persons to a member, therefore cash, defined unincorporated. We're talking of clubs. I mean, if it's called a club or association of persons, body of persons, I don't know. And this, again, this is not defined. But there were a lot of litigation whether the food supplied by club, service given by club to members was taxable. There were a lot of views in VAT laws. Yes, no, but here they have clarified. Now here, what you are being taxed? Supply of goods. There is no service here. Be very, very careful. So if there's a club and this is providing a composite supply by way of service, food and drinks, it will not get covered here because they are saying only goods, not composite supply. If the lawmakers want you to give exemption for composite supply, nobody stopped them from using the phrase right in Circular 7 also. Now, in the course of employees, I have read few articles, a lot of people have written. I disagree with all these three legal propositions, completely disagree. For example, if an employee provides the services on a contract basis to an associate company, here, yes, he is providing services on a contract basis. He's not providing in the course of employment. So this is irrelevant writing. Somebody wrote this article. Service provided on contract basis by a person. Once again, it's principal to principal. There is no employer-employee relationship. Now, the last one is debatable. And this is a very good, it's happening nowadays quite a lot. Any amount received by an employee from the employer on premature termination of the contract of employment. So there has to be a contract of employment. So if a director does not have a contract of employment, I'm not saying director employer, not only for this particular clause, I'm giving an example to you. अगर कोई डायरेक्टर के पास एम्प्लॉयमेंट कॉन्ट्रैक्ट नहीं है और उसको 1 करोड़ रुपए दिया जाता है, अब इन्फोसिस में, टीसीएस में signing of money crores and crores, all these will be taxed. Amount paid in services provided as right to the employer in the course of employment, hence amount so paid would not be chargeable to GST. However, any amount paid for not joining or a complete competing business will be liable to be taxed being paid for providing the service of forbearance. The first part, in my view, is debatable whether this can be taxed or not. The second part, I will say this is not taxable because in the course or in relation to employment, these are part of my employment only. For example, you execute a bond for IT company for 3 years and you leave them. There's a payment made. Now, can we say this was not in the course of employment? If we come to the conclusion it is not in the course of employment, yes, we are out of it. But it is highly debatable issue. Sale of land, we have done this, same thing here. Supply of goods from a, now again understand this is a very, very important, there are many advanced ruling on this particular issue. Supply of goods, not services. So this is, we are talking only of goods here. Supply of goods from a place in the non-taxable territory to another place in the non-taxable territory without such goods entering into India. Huge, huge legal proposition. You are an Indian company. You buy and sell computers. In this COVID-19 period, a US company offers you Apple Macs for 40% of the general price. You say, you do a contract for 2 lakh. And the 2 lakh Apple Macs, you make a sale to Germany without these goods entering India. Well, this will be tax exempt. This will not be a supply for the purpose of Section 7 if the goods do not enter in India. Let's take the second proposition. It's all there in the PPT, but I'm not going to read that. I'll skip the reading, save time. If you import goods, those 1 lakh computers come into customs. You do not clear them. You do not file bill of entry. to clear them for home consumption. You re-export them, same thing will apply, because an area beyond custom is deemed to be non-taxable. The goods can be taxed only when you file as per Customs Act, when you file bill entry by home consumption. Or if you take the goods in, clear for home consumption, then you make a sale to Germany. Again, this is non-taxable because this will be exports. But exports, you'll have to prove that there were exports, goods moved, you exported them. So in all three such cases, if you're dealing with a non-taxable territory, either exporting goods from one country to another outside India, or goods come here, you re-export, or you bring the goods and re-export. In all three cases, there'll be no tax. High sea sale. I think we all know what is high sea sale. I'm not going to dwell into this. The only important thing is where there is one showcase notice that has come to me. Supply of warehouse goods. Warehouse goods as defined in Customs Act. This facility is available under Customs Act. There's a notification issued. These are the custom bonded warehouse. So if you make an IC sale from those warehoused custom goods, custom bonded warehouse goods, then only you get exemption. If you are keeping the goods into a private bond warehouse, you are in trouble. And in one case, it has happened for electronic batteries where we have paid tax without disputing it because this is a notification. So if you want an exemption, you have to satisfy the condition of notification. And Supreme Court has reversed the law. They say if notification is clear and there is nothing else available to the dealer, then the notification shall be interpreted in favor of revenue, not in favor of the assessee. Commissioner Custom was Dilip Kumar. If you guys want to read it, it's a 2018 5-judge judgment overruling Sun Export. Anyway, this by the way. So these are circulars. I can skip this. Now we say to be a supply. Why I put in separate slides is to make it, a pointed reference. We say that for supply, it's necessary because you have to do it, supply the goods or services or both in the course of a business. There is one exception. Import of services for a consideration, even if not in the course or furtherance of business, are liable to GST. That is very important. This is the only definition. Whatever it would mean, I'm not entering into if I buy my medical services, what will happen, what will not happen. I'm not getting into it. But here, the course of further business is not required. Now, again, this particular slide also, let's spend 2 minutes. Supplies in the course of furtherance of business qualify as supply under GST. Hence, any supply made by an individual in his personal capacity, I told you the old example, the same example is here, will not be covered in GST unless they fall within definition of business. अब business क्या है? मैं धंधा करता हूँ, old jewelry लेता हूँ, उसको बेचता हूँ, mesh करके बेचता हूँ, या वैसे बेचता हूँ, जो भी करता हूँ, then it will fall. It must pay tax. Supply must be by a taxable person. A supply between two non-taxable persons will not attract GST at all. But a taxable person is also a person who is required to be registered. So there you will have problems. If the person you are dealing with, though he does not hold a GST number, but he was required to be registered in view of Section 24 or any other provision or any other notification, then he was supposed to pay forward charge plus charge tax. Now he cannot say, "Sir, मेरा तो 20 लाख से कम था, मेरे को किस बात का tax?" You can say, "Buddy, you paid Mr. Verma a fees of 20,000 rupees. Reverse charge काटना, सब गड़बड़ हो गया तुम्हारा, इसलिए आपको ये टैक्स देना पड़ेगा आपको." So if you have taken a number of GST numbers within the same state, each number will make a distinct person. Section 25. I'm not reading Section 25 because somebody will read it. It's applicable many times, Section 25. So if a company for various business verticals has different GST registration numbers in Delhi, they will all be called distinct person. Therefore, whether you are supplying a service or a manpower or a loyal services, CA services, or transferring goods, and then they will all be deemed to be on principal basis. SEZ, notwithstanding, you have, as a supplier, you have one number in Delhi, but if you want to operate an SEZ, you will have to take a separate registration for SEZ. Now, this, all of you will have to read, understand very carefully. If you do not understand place of service, this entire law is useless. It will be only litigation. So section 12(13) of IGST Act for services or for goods, so what is the place of supply? That will decide your tax liability. And what is the place of supply? If your place of supply is in Delhi, it's an intrastate supply. If the POS is outside Delhi, it could be interstate supply. It could also be interstate supply, because interstate supply, the definition under section 8 of IGST, that is section 10, has many combinations. So I'm not getting into this. So therefore, the POS, I must tell you, whoever is attending this particular program, do not skip this particular presentation on POS. And there are two fantastic people doing this POS, this thing. Intra and interstate supplies. If you confuse between the two, you will have to go for adjustment of tax. And this is a long drawn process. कोई देने वाला नहीं है आपको. The location of supplier and place of supply determine whether the supply is treated as interest. If location of supplier, if the location of supplier and recipient are in two different states, it's interstate supply. If the same state, generally we say this is interstate supply. Accordingly, you pay tax. Generally, I'm not saying always. Now, these are supplies which are always interstate supplies. Imports, exports, supplies from SEZs are treated as deemed interstate supplies. So, इनका आप कुछ नहीं कर सकते. आपको सेल करना है तो भी आपको IGST का बिल काटना है. अगर वो कुछ आपको बेचते हैं तो वो भी आपको IGST में करना है. So, कोई import करें, export करें, या SEZ से कुछ भी करें आपको, they'll be interstate supplies. Last we touch quickly. I think I can go up to 5:15. I told Manmohan. Manmohan, 5:15.
Let me check, sir.
We can go up to another 20 minutes now.
Another 10 minutes only.
Okay, I'll try to finish quickly. Okay. Now, section 8 deals with composite mixed supplies. It's a huge law. बहुत गंदा कानून है ये इस particular GST में. Because works contract has been restricted to those 13 contracts only for immovable property. All other combination of goods and services, including AMCs, fall under composite or mixed supplies. The logic is very clear. There would have been different rates. Good services, बहुत problem होता. For example, a car service. उसमें auto parts लगेंगे, diesel लगेगा, lubricant लगेगा, ये लगेगा, वो लगेगा, वो कौन rate करेगा. So lawmaker decided, like bundle services concept in service tax, they decided, let's make this law as composite and mixed supplies. So they came out with the condition, okay, what is the composite supply? We know the definitions. We will very quickly go through in 10 minutes, as Manmohan says. I'm sure he must have cut time with him. A composite supply would mean a supply section 7, made by a taxable person as defined, to a recipient defined, consisting of 2 or more taxable supplies. Both supplies must be taxable if you want to apply here, of goods or services, or both, or any. Why taxable supply? Because if 2 or more concepts are not taxable supply, then this will not be a composite supply. And if it's not a composite supply, it's automatically a mixed supply. So you have to be very careful about this fine legal distinction. A composite supply would mean a supply made by a taxable person to a recipient, consisting of 2 or more taxable suppliers, supplies of goods or services of both, or any combination thereof. Now, 2 or more supplies or any combination thereof, which are naturally bundled. Now, this is naturally bundled and supplied in connection with each other in ordinary course of business, one of which is a principal supply. Supposing a woman goes to a boutique, we have a lot of women in our audience.
Vineet ji, Sushil ji is not.
All other
Ji, Manmohan ji.
हाँ, Sushil ji is not audible to me.
To me also he was not audible. His video has paused, I guess.
Hello.
His video has paused. Acha, you say single staff. Please, sorry.
Vineet ji. Vineet ji, are you with us?
Let me talk to him.
हाँ, भाटिया जी, सुशील जी आपने अपना वीडियो ऑडियो ऑफ कर लिया। सुशील जी अपना माइक ऑन कीजिए।
कर दिया।
हाँ जी सर, आइए।
अब आगे सर, आगे।
Screen also is required to be shared again, please.
हाँ।
हुआ नहीं है ये?
Screen sharing has to be done again.
यार मैं इतना एक्सपर्ट आदमी नहीं हूँ।
No, it's okay.
कोई बात नहीं, बिना स्क्रीन के कर दीजिए।
स्क्रीन शेयरिंग के कर दो।
नहीं हो जाएगा
हो गया सर,
कहता हूँ
हो गया।
So when we say composite supply, this means supply made by a taxable person, two or more taxable supplies which are naturally bundled and in conjunction with each other for a price, one of which will be a principal supply. What is a principal supply? Which is the dominant objective. Works contract mein dominant theory was overruled by Supreme Court in a judgment. But here they have reapplied because they are not dealing with work contract. They are dealing with bundle supplies. So if the intention was for this lady to buy a suit, so dupatta may be 30% taxable or 100% taxable. If the suit was taxable at 12%, she will pay 12% taxable. So in a composite supply, the rate of principal supply shall be applicable for the entire supply. It could be more, it could be less. So if the principal, like for example, car service is 18%, auto parts are 28%. So if the parts are used and you can prove two supplies were given together, not individual supply, then yes, their 18% service will pay unless there is a notification to the contrary. Now, on the composite, on the mixed supply, now the rule is, if a various elements of bundle service are naturally bundled in the ordinary course of business, it shall be treated as provision of a single service, which give such bundle is essential character. Whether services are bundled in the ordinary course of business would depend on fact to fact. You can read it. Now, what is the rule? This rule is my own creation. I am not quoting any judgment. The nature of the various services in a bundle of service will also help in determining whether services are bundled in the ordinary course of business. If the nature of service is such that one of the services in the main service and the other services combined with such service are in the nature of incidental or ancillary service, which help in better enjoyment of the main service, this will remain a composite service. Of course, we can't have a formula. There is no formula given in the act, nor we can design any formula. Mixed supply. We will just finish after this. A mixed supply means, again, not includes, it means two or more individual supplies. The taxable word is missing. So it could be, one could be taxable, what could be tax-free, doesn't matter. Two or more individual supplies of goods or services or any combination thereof made in conjunction with each other by a taxable person for a single price when such supply does not constitute a composite supply. So if the criteria of composite supply is not, for example, there is one tax-free, one taxable, this cannot be a composite supply. It necessarily has to be mixed supply. If that is so, the highest rate will be applicable as per Section 8. In both cases, the seller, the supplier can supply individual items. There is no issue. We see Haldiram doing, BK Nawala doing. I know how they do it. So they keep doing it. Now I'll finish. I will not go beyond this, but I'll leave the PPT. It can be shared. This notification of 12/2017 central tax. It tells you a list of 81 services which are to or by the government which are declared exempt. All are conditional. But if you understand this particular notification, we'll be in a much better position to advise our clients who deal with the government. Thank you, buddies. Thank you so much for your patience. You can leave the questions. We shall be able to answer tomorrow without fail, all the questions. And for the time being, best of luck to all of you. Manmohan, thank you. Vinodji, if you are there, thank you for your time. And Vineet, Rakesh, thank you so much, buddies. Suresh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sushilji. Thanks a lot for such a lengthy and marathon session. I invite a few questions. If we can take up on the subject from the chat. Let us start with chat.
15 मिनट और चला दे.
हाँ, सुशील जी.
हाँ जी.
हाँ, so let us take some questions if they are related to today's issues first, and otherwise we will take some other questions also.
I think Parachi is handling that, so can we go to Parachi and someone from the analyst who is
okay, there is one question. Okay, Parachi, if you are ready, otherwise I am trying. There is one question. A business asset for which no ITC was claimed, whether a transfer of such an asset without consideration will attract a liability merely because it is classified as supply of goods under Schedule 2?
It is debatable. Yes, no, both.
Yes,
there are advanced rulings going on this issue.
Okay.
Any other?
Yeah. A buying agent get commission from...
Vineet, what is your view?
Yes.
No, my view is it will not be taxable. If input tax credit has not been claimed, then it will not fall in Schedule 1 and it will not be taxable. And then secondly, one needs to check whether the asset which is being permanently disposed of is a business asset or not. If it is a business asset, then only then Schedule 1, Entry 1 comes into play. Otherwise, it won't.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Vineet ji. Another question, Alok Khare, a buying agent gets commission from his foreign buyer for the facility provided for export of goods by local Indian parties, whether it is taxable supply or exports.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Manmohanji, this issue will relate to place of supply.
Yeah, so we will take later on.
We will take it. We have to take up that issue when place of supply is dealt with.
No, but Vineet, once he gets a commission in India.
So that depends. That depends if it can be for a commission from if it is intermediary services only, then the place of supply will qualify to be India. Otherwise, won't.
Yes. Otherwise not.
Section 2(6) IGST you have to keep in mind. Yeah. Most of them are intermediaries.
If another question.
Rakesh, your view on this?
Which one, sir?
Are all commissions?
Questions are not visible to me. From where you are reading, sir?
The question he is reading from his own. Manmohanji is reading the question from the question and answer session.
Okay.
So what are they?
No, I was looking at the chat box.
नहीं question and answer box से मैं ले रहा हूँ questions को. So the issue will be dealt with in detail when we will taking place of supply of cross-border transactions.
You can tell your team members to keep it ready.
Yeah. If a taxable person, a trader of machinery, sells car, which is shown as his business assets on which no ITC has been taken whatsoever, is this sale or car is taxable?
Rakesh is the king. Rakesh, answer please.
Yes, it is taxable, but for the purpose of selling of the vehicles, they have provided the concessional rate. It will be taxable at 12 or 18%, not at 28. Without compulsion.
And then there is a margin money scheme also available for sale of cars.
In that notification,
car dealers. He's not a car dealer.
No, that margin money scheme is not only for car dealers; it's for everybody.
It is for everyone. It will be taxable only on the value which exceeds the depreciated value at the
right.
Right. Absolutely right. And if that depreciated, it is always a depreciated values excess payment that is always taxable.
Yes.
And another question is, it is related to ITR, we can skip that. If a agriculturist make a interstate supply, is it taxable or not?
First, you have to fall in section 2 whether he's an agriculturist.
So if it is he is an agriculturist, whether it is
अगर नहीं है तो tax देना पड़ेगा.
हाँ जी.
वो definition ही बड़ी खतरनाक है agriculturist की.
If it is taxable,
mixed supply का question है.
Otherwise not.
हाँ जी sir.
If we organizing an event charging 10,000 rupees
Taxable
and giving some gift in the like of pen, diaries and pen drive, etc., whether it is a mixed supply or composite supply, and what our rate will be charged?
In my view, it's a mixed supply. You're doing a conference and giving gifts.
Yes.
मतलब शिवाद्रिकल की बोतल दे दी, कोई घड़ी दे दी. राकेश क्या होगा, मिक्स है कंपोजिट?
सर देखना पड़ेगा.
Yeah, in my view also.
It will be supply.
In my view it's composite.
Huh?
My view it is composite because the primary. Because primary agenda is to attend the conference and gift is incidental.
No, they should be naturally bundled. Are they naturally bundled? That is the criteria you have to satisfy. They are not naturally bundled at all.
Yeah, these are, in my view also it is mixed supply.
In Amritsar they are naturally bundled, elsewhere they are not.
Yeah, so it is not naturally bundled.
But the thing is, as Vineet rightly said, that the principal supply is the holding of the seminar, and if the certain things are supplied free in the seminar, such as stationery or pads and something like that, it is part and parcel of that seminar itself, and we cannot say that number of supplies are supplied free.
Mixed supplies says 2 or more supplies, not taxable supplies.
That is true. That is true.
No, I don't think it will be a composite.
No, but it is not.
मतलब हम tax नहीं करेंगे. मतलब उसको tax नहीं करेंगे.
But Rakesh ji, in this particular example,
taxed as a composite supply. I am not saying it will not be taxed, but it will be taxed at the rate of composite supply.
That depends what gifts are given. If the gifts are, notepads, pens, then yes.
The thing is, if gifts are of the nature of that, it becomes the principal supply and even becomes the ancillary supplies, and certainly the gifts would be taxable.
Mixed supply. चलो अगला चलो. ये debatable issue होंगे हमेशा.
Is TCS calculated on taxable value or invoice value?
This issue, Manpreet ji, we will take up when valuation is taken up.
Sure, sir. Valuation and directors का sir touch करना चाहेंगे? Now lots of question on AAR which has been.
नहीं भैया, हमें टैक्स नहीं आता.
अच्छा.
हमें तो इनकम टैक्स आ ही नहीं आता.
नहीं, डायरेक्टर्स के इशू में सर इट इज वेरी क्लियर. डायरेक्टर्स के इश्यूज में इट इज वेरी क्लियर. डायरेक्टर्स कैन बी एम्प्लॉय ऑफ द कंपनी और डायरेक्टर्स मे नॉट बी द एम्प्लॉयज ऑफ द कंपनी. Those directors who are in a employment agreement with the company or working as a whole time director, definitely any supply of service by them to the company is not at all taxable as per schedule 3. But those directors who are not in employment agreement or who are not working with the company as a employee, their services are always as a directors, other services and remuneration, any kind of remuneration or sitting fees to them is taxable in my view.
Sir.
I agree with this.
Sir. If the employer provides canteen facilities and transportation facility to employees and recovers some amount from employees, whether it will be covered in the definition of supply or not, sir?
But whatever recovery you are making, that would certainly be taxable.
And the valuation, what will be the valuation in that case, sir? Supplying his services free of cost or very lesser value. So the
Manpreet ji, valuation shall be on the open market valuations.
Yes.
And if any subsidy is been given, the valuations for taxable purposes has to be arrived at adding back
fair market value.
Yeah, fair market value.
Business stock donated to NGO for COVID-19 relief, is it supply schedule 3?
If ITC has been taken, yes. If ITC has not been taken, no.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Casual commission received from a sale of a flat by a salaried employee or a person whose turnover is below the basic registration limit. Will registration be required in case and GST will be applicable?
It's not in the course of business.
Is not in the course of business.
No, but even one time can be a business. Rakesh, what are your view? Rakesh?
Sir, commission is in the course of the business only, but since it is below taxable limit.
No, the question is whether salary would, when you compute taxable amount for the purpose of registration, whether salary would get included or not, that would be the question.
Yes,
Salary in my view shall not get included because it is out of supply definition due to schedule 3 inclusion.
No, it will get covered is exempt supply only.
No, it is not a supply at all. So it is not an exempt supply.
Okay.
But Manmohan ji,
Yes, sir.
अगर आप if you pay commission as a part of the contract of as a employment contract का हिस्सा देते हैं, then what is the situation in your view?
सर अगर एम्प्लॉयमेंट कॉन्ट्रैक्ट के अकॉर्डिंगली कमीशन दी जाती है ऑन द टॉप लाइन और वॉट एवर रेशियो से सपोज 1% ऑन द टॉप सेल्स, that will also be treated as remuneration of an employee and no GST can be levied on that in my view.
Yes, yes.
Any
I think
other
you're
view
right,
maybe?
yeah. That is what I wanted to actually point out especially. Okay.
Yeah.
if a taxable person, a trader of a machinery, sell cars which is shown as his business assets on which no ITC has been taken over
We have done this.
whatsoever.
This question has already been taken, Mantri ji.
Okay, sir. So
I
last,
think,
these are the open question, and close 23 question has already been asked by various panelists. I think we should not go for that. I think so.
I think it is now time also to say goodbye for the day.
Yes.
So I thanks Sushil ji and each one of you for joining in today and being here for such a long hours. I request everyone to please join in same time 2:30 p.m. Tomorrow also, so that we can have a live session as we have today. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining, everyone. Thank you.
I think please announce tomorrow's topic.
Tomorrow's topic also,
Yeah,
Manmohan ji,
yes, sir.
please announce for the
Tomorrow's-
attendees. For the
Tomorrow's,
attendees.
yes, sir, please. Tomorrow's topic will cover section 9, 3, 4, 5, and it will be supply only, and this will cover section 7 and section 9 of IGST Act, section 7, section 8, section 9 of the IGST Act also. Sandeep Gagji will be covering the session, and the whole of these schedule would be circulated by evening to all the participants by tomorrow evening, by today evening.
Before we leaving, we request everybody to give big round of applause to Sunil Verma ji on the behalf of Prolog Study Circle. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
सुशील जी बहुत अच्छा कवर किया, very nice.
So
Thank you.
thank you very much. I request Rakesh Garg ji for his concluding remark.
Friends, first of all, I must thank everybody to have participated in this wonderful program of 10 days, which is covering from basics to the experts. Though the title is the back to the basics, but the way it has been heading and the looking at the queries raised by the participants, it is not only confined to the basics, it is covering the crucial and vital aspects relating to experts as well. First of all, I must thank to Sushil ji for this wonderful deliberation. I would like to thank everybody on the panelists, particularly Vinod Jain sahab, and all the participants who have attended this program. Thank you, friends.